Welcome to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese, a program that can help you become liberated in the modern world. Now, here's your host, Dr. Kevin W. Reese.
So could this pandemic and everything around it be a catalyst to rehabilitate humanity? Welcome to episode number 68. Today, I'm talking to holistic health educator, author, and researcher Ronnie Landis. We're going to talk about everything happening right now and what he calls the theatrical production. We're going to talk about social engineering, the cycles of crisis in the world, the secrets that are being revealed right now, and the new normal that's around the corner. We're also going to talk about empowering the immune system, the science of cold therapy, and neurogenic tremoring. Ronnie, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So what would you say is the birthright of a human being?
Okay, great question to just pop right off with. I mean, ultimately, it's sovereignty. Sovereignty is the birthright of all human beings, and we can elaborate and expand upon its meaning, and there's multiple dimensions and layers to the onion of that particular conversation. But it's sovereignty. It's having full agency and autonomy of our own consciousness, of our own physiology, our physicality, our physical body, having agency over our health, what we put in our mouth, what we do when we do it, and who we choose to do it with. That's really our birthright. Total creative freedom, creative influence over our reality, in a nutshell.
A lot of that is sort of slowly being taken away right now.
Well, it's interesting. I would say the perception of that is one fractal of I don't want to use the word possibility. It's one particular timeline on the holographic screen of the theatrical production that is currently taking place right now on planet Earth, and most of that's being transmitted through the mainstream media, and then alternative media and alternative journalists broadcasting on the internet. And the way that I look at it right now is you just have a lot of different narratives playing out, and some narratives are clashing against each other. They have almost like a bipartisan type of support, depending on which if you lean right or you lean left, and if you're more in the center, more neutral, more independent, so to speak, independent thinker, then you can kind of gather the different pieces of information, the different constellation of data points that you find on the internet that are informing the particular narrative that our own sovereign minds are tracking. That's the thing I find most interesting right now. It really is a choose your own adventure story, right? There's so much, not just information, but again, there's so much narrativizing, so many different timeline projections. And what I mean by timeline projections is the particular timeline that we as a collective human race are on. And we're not all on the same timeline. We're not in the singularity point. We're very much in this dualistic or contrasting type of experience where each individual is overlaying their particular experience. I should say it this way: they're overlaying their experience based on their interpretation of reality. We're really given the opportunity to exercise our own sovereignty. This is the moment in time where it's all coming to a head. All secrets are being revealed. Everything that's been held in the deep underground tunnels in the shadows of humanity is literally being unearthed right in front of us. And those who have eyes to see have already seen and already seeing. And those who don't, well, I can't really speak about those people because I don't really know what's going on with them. I've kind of actually chosen to focus on the living, right? And to focus on those that do have eyes to see and do have ears to hear and have already heard the call. And I think that's what we're seeing right now is there is a mass exodus of people that are that are ejecting themselves out of the pre-programmed cultural, societal, software narrative,
Yep.
and are choosing something different. And it's an interesting thing to witness the galvanizing of people that might have been leaning in a particular direction, right? Interpret that however you like, but are now waking up out of that particular illusory program, if you will, the conditioning that we've all been subject to, without a doubt, and are are going in a different direction. It's just really interesting, this idea of like the silent majority. Well, the silent majority ain't so silent anymore, and now what used to be fringe and used to be kind of like out there, whatever you want to say, conspiracy theory or tinfoil hat wearing kind of ideas. Now that's actually made its way to the mainstream and has actually become the majority versus the minority. I think the minority is actually those people that that have not woken up out of the dream spell, so to speak. So that's just really the interesting thing, when you bring up something like that, this idea like our freedoms are being taken away from us. Well, my understanding and my tracking of history is that every 40 years, it seems like we go through a particular cycle in our society within the transition of the generations, within the transition of cycles. It's really cyclical continuity that seems to happen. So you have these breakdowns for breakthroughs, and it kind of keeps going on like that. And so what I notice is where we are right now is not that different than where we were literally 100 years ago to this day with the swine flu. That's a whole interesting thing right in there. But just looking at it kind of backing off from like what appears to be real on the surface, and the narrative and the theatrical production that's being broadcast to us, because this theatrical production has a conclusion point that it's seeking. The energy, if you will, of this particular timeline is seeking a conclusion point. And this timeline that I'm speaking about has been going on for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And so my thing now is like, I'm stoked. I'm relieved. I'm just like, thank goodness it all came to a head, because I think a lot of us could feel for many, many, many years that, something's not right.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sure you definitely, like myself and many of our contemporaries, our friends and our peer group, we've been on this for a long time, whether it's, it's the medical malpractice and the allopathic and the pharmaceutical industry, genetically modified foods,
chemtrails,
the chemical warfare that has been thrust upon us, and all the, unimaginable amount of chemical pollutants that have been, thrown into our atmosphere, since the early 1940s, the advent of the Industrial Revolution, et cetera, et cetera. We have been born into an aberrant situation that somehow, by the grace of God, and somehow how this miracle of a body, this technology that none of us even really have a true understanding of beyond just basic anatomy and physiology and all the things that we're learning, the microbiome and all that, that's still a very rudimentary understanding of like, how has this body actually been able to not only survive, but in many cases thrive through the onslaught and the pressure of a junk food upbringing, of a processed food upbringing, of everything that's been pressurized upon us. Somehow we've been able to take that pressure, and many of us have been able to kind of turn lead into gold. And for some other people, it's been maybe a different story. And so we're all making our way through this aberrant, abstract reality, if you will. And now we're at a place where like all secrets are being revealed, and thank goodness, it's about time.
We've definitely been socially engineered. There's no doubt about it. And, it's time to become self-reliant. I did an episode some time ago on becoming more self-sufficient. I had Curtis Stone on here, and, creating market gardens and homesteads. And he said something very revealing, that it's a time where some people are going this way, the 5G way, the technological way, and other people are going the so-called 5D way.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting into their sovereign side. They're getting away from the city. They're creating a homestead. You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
let's collect rainwater. Let's make the garden. Let's get the solar going, and let's free ourselves from the attachment of society.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that as well?
I mean, 100%. Well put. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, right? Like, yeah, definitely. We have been socialized through social conditioning, subtle forms of MK Ultra mind control, and through the media subliminal messages. The narrativizing of our reality. There's been a narrator narrating our personal reality, and we've been homogenized in this collective soup, this homogenized collective soup, and we you know, it's nothing short of factory farming for humans. Maybe it's grass fed for some, and wild, like ranging, wild ranging, and that kind of thing. It's that kind of model, and so there's definitely been a human farming operation, and that the trickle down effect of that is what we see through the subsets of the agricultural system, whether it's animal agriculture, it's plant agriculture. Just in that tip, there's interesting challenges and pros and cons with both, and depending on how you go, it's really just depending on where your consciousness is at and what's fueling it. But that's we can go a lot of different directions with that. But yeah, ultimately to your point, yes, there again, there's a mass exodus, and there's from the plug-in drug, right? And the people are unplugging, and really in this like in between limbo state of like whatever was our reality, whatever was our life, whatever was our particular paradigmical belief systems, our paradigms, those have all been shattered on the riverbanks of reality. And I think for a lot of people, there's different kind of I guess categories where a lot of people are at. I would just say there's people that are forerunning on the front lines that have 20/20 vision and have been in preparation through their own awakening, through their own taking their power back over just their bodies. That's sovereignty 101. We have to start with our bodies. We have to start with the purification of our temple and rebuilding this body, and then everything kind of follows from there. So for a lot of us that have been on that tip for a long time, I think we've been very well equipped to handle the brunt of the cosmic calamity of like current circumstances. But what I will say is that what I believe, and this based on a significant amount of intel information, cross-referencing information, relentlessly decoding for the last was it September 1st right now, September 2nd, one of the third, whatever it is. So like since January, I'd say I've just been kind of like just relentlessly trying to decode this whole thing, and it's now revealed itself to me in kind of a like again like a conclusion, like a story seeking conclusion. And the story is the story of us, the story of humanity, the story of how we got here. And so once we actually go back through historical references and we realize that history happened one way, but it was told another, right? History happened one way, but we were sold a whole laundry list of stories and little cliff notes about pretty significant things that have taken place in the transition points of our ancestry, which, by the way, epigenetically has a direct effect on us now. And that in of itself is just a profound discovery. But we are literally at the epoch point. This is the time that we've all been waiting for, right? I don't see this as a crisis or even a crisis of consciousness. If I were to say this is a crisis of anything, it's a crisis of perspective, right? A lot of people just, they don't have perspective. They can't wrap their head around kind of the bigger picture. And I get that. But it should be obvious enough that what once was no longer will be. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think a lot of us, I'm sure you can comment on this. we've been waiting for something to shift,
Mm.
right? Because we knew this thing just wasn't sustainable.
We thought it was going to happen in 2012.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like if we rework the mathematics on all that, and maybe if Terence McKenna was still here, he would have reworked his his theories on 2012, and I feel like what a lot of people were anticipation about with 2012 is actually happening now. And I think the mathematics got it off about 8 years to the actual physical, tangible event horizon that now we're full on into.
And there's so many people out there who literally think that things are going to go back to normal in a few months, or when a vaccine comes out or whatever.
Yeah.
And they don't have the understanding or the acceptance to understand that life is over as we know it.
Absolutely.
And how are they going to deal with that new normal when the new normal hasn't even kicked in yet?
Right. Yeah.
How are they going to mentally handle that come, let's just say 2021, 2022, somewhere in there?
Yeah, you're not pulling any punches here. So this is great. I mean, I've given this considerable thought. In fact, this is the primary kind of focus of my mind, is really what comes after this? What comes after between now and November? Because be reassured, like everything that's happening is leading up to November. And that's not a political statement, by the way. This is people that think this has anything to do with politics are caught up deep in the theatrical production. Like that whole thing is so scripted. And I'm not saying it's necessarily even a malevolent script. All I'm saying is that it's a script. It's literally like a show. It's like a movie reel.
My favorite metaphor is it's professional wrestling.
Dude, that's come up a number of times lately, and especially, we can go all over the place with this, but that really is like, and that's the perspective thing, right? Like when you have a perspective, it helps organize all the information and put it into place. And this is why when we get caught up on the internet and reading online articles and kind of this fragmented bits and pieces of information with or without context or deeper understanding, the way that the human mind has been conditioned is in this binary kind of impulse, response, reaction kind of condition, and it's very left brain dominant. There's not a lot of right brain activation or right brain hemisphere balance. And we need that right now more than ever, because that's what's going to allow us to create the innovation to serve in what I believe is going to be the rehabilitation of humanity. That's what I really feel more than anything, that this is what we're moving towards. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's also this acknowledgement that, yes, what's happening and what's on the other end of this. And when I say under this, I'm really speaking very short timeline here. I'm not talking about a year from now or 2 years. I'm talking about the next month to 2 months. And then following November, all I can say based on my knowledge and my piecing together of things is that the dominoes have been falling extremely quick. But it's going to be unavoidably obvious to the public. And that's really what the theatrical show is actually all about. It's a slow, controlled demolition of culture, is the best way of saying it. A slow demolition, a dissolving of the holographic projection of celebrity icons, just the whole bit. I mean, you know it. We can see it. I don't even necessarily need to explain. I'm happy to go deeper into it, but just I think everyone knows what I mean, and especially when listening to this, you've seen it. Like you've seen the disillusion of Hollywood. You've seen the disillusion of celebrity culture and the inversion of logic, the inverted symbolism, the inverted morality, or lack thereof altogether. It's just being completely put in our face, and it's being put in our face so we have the opportunity to wake up. This is all about us waking up seizing our power.
It's like a
And
device. So that
yeah,
device, catalyst.
that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
And not too long ago, I saw you put out a video, I believe, on your Instagram where you were doing sort of a shaking dance. Some people would call it a Kundalini
Mm.
dance, and you were getting rid of certain energies. What were you doing there? Can you describe that?
Yeah. So what that's called is neurogenic tremoring.
Hmm.
So in nature, the mammalian nervous system is designed to discharge cascading chemical cascade of stress. So whenever an animal, for example, is under the threat of being attacked or being hunted, if it gets away, then it takes about 30 minutes, or 30 minutes, 30 seconds, or a little bit longer, completely just convulsively shaking out. And what's
Hmm.
happening is the nervous system is discharging all that influx of stress chemicals, all that cortisol, that adrenaline, all that, and it's discharging it immediately, right? So it doesn't store itself into the musculature and the neuromusculature of the body and build up, right? Animals have this innate instinct, and we have this same design. In fact, ours is far more sophisticated. However, it takes conscious effort for us. It's not necessarily just instinctual, although I think we have the instinct to do these things, but we have to retrain and reteach ourselves how to be human.
Hmm.
And so that's what that really is. It's just really just, it's shaking out the body and
Hmm.
letting the circuitry and the circulatory system just open up,
Right.
just move the energy. And that it's just really like that. That's really like energetic hygiene. All the energy that builds up in the system and creates kind of this stagnation and this soreness and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Well, when I first saw it, the first thing I thought of was Osho the Bhagwan, man. He created a meditation back in the 70s, maybe even the 60s, called dynamic meditation. And he had people do things like that, plus jumping up and down and dancing. And
Mm-hmm.
after they spent time doing that, then he had them lay down and go into a silent meditation.
Yeah. Yes.
Back then, people didn't know what was happening, and they accused him of like devil worship and all that. Now, if somebody came along and saw you doing that, people are going to be like, what's wrong with this dude?
Yeah.
I've also seen you doing cold therapy
Mm-hmm.
in an ice bath. And
Yes.
of course, you have to do breath work to really handle that. Of course, this was kind of made famous in the modern era by Wim Hof. I've experimented with it just a little bit. It looks like you really, no pun intended, really dove into it. So tell me about cold therapy and how it helps you.
Yeah. I mean, well, look, cold therapy is the ultimate therapeutic tool that we have. I mean, Wim Hof says that cold is his teacher, cold is his spiritual guru. And what's interesting about the cold is that like cold water concentrates energy, right? So when you freeze water, or it gets to that really, really cold point, the water molecules, they bond together really tight. And so it concentrates that energy together. And you notice if you go into a cold shower or you jump into a cold river or an ice bath, immediately what happens? Like all that energy, it all just contracts together, and you forces you to go into this breathing rhythm, and then you start working with it, and all of a sudden you have a tremendous amount of stored bioelectric energy. You have real energy, and it's almost immediate. And if you had a fog, you had some kind of a hangover, or you're just kind of, you had this kind of foggy energy hanging over you, it helps discharge that and push that away. And that's where the clarity, the mental clarity that comes on, it just wakes us up, right?
Mm,
But the interesting thing about hot water, which we've all been conditioned to take hot showers and
right.
kind of, slowly kill ourselves through comfort, the hot water disassociates those bonds and they start to move out, right? The same thing when you heat up fat molecules, they disentangle and start to spread out and expand. Then energy starts to expand and become disorganized. So the cold helps to organize the energy. It structures the energy, in other words, just like all spring water that comes out of the aquifer, it comes out of the spring, it comes out cold. And the colder the water is, the more structured the water is, and chances are it has the most diversity of biological life, beneficial bacteria in it, and all those kind of things. So it's kind of it's a kind of interesting way to think about it. So if you want to experience more energy and you want to structure your body, or have this self-organizing machine called your body, it knows what to do. You just have to give it the right conditions, the right environment, and the right dose of whatever the medicine is. In this case, cold is the ultimate medicine for your entire body, for your mind as well.
Yeah, not only that, but I would like to add also that hot water opens up your pores.
Yes.
And
yes.
if we're bathing in tap water, which is pretty much what we do, that's our choice. I mean, that's what we're given. Whatever's in that tap water is going into our bloodstream. I ran into a gentleman at an ashram once, and he carried with him a Berkey water filter, the mini one. He brought it with him wherever he went.
Mm-hmm.
And he set it up and he did his water. And I was like, yeah, but what about your showers, man? He was like, I just take cold showers. He's like, nothing's going in my bloodstream.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a great point. That's a very good point for people to understand. Yeah. When you take hot showers, it opens up the pores, it opens up the circulation vents, and just so people know, tap water and the water running through your piping system is most likely encoded and codified so many different known particulates, chemicals, pharmaceutical runoff, homeopathic doses of pharmaceutical runoff, just the recycling of the municipal water supply. So I'd really just advise people, you really got to get filters. You really got to get shower filters.
Yeah.
And otherwise you become the filter, right? If you don't filter your water, you become the filter yourself, and then your body has to filter through all that stuff. And that's not fun. That's not the best ever, right?
That's a great point. Are you taking cold showers every day? Is that part of your...
Yeah. I'm at the point where hot showers are uncomfortable to me.
Wow.
They feel uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good unless it's like a super hot day or something. But even now I notice I do a lot of jumping in the river, and almost every day, cold showers, pretty much. Yeah. For the most part, cold showers, because my body's internal thermostat, it's regulated itself at this point. So when you do this kind of thing, you have to you can easily shock your system, which is not a bad thing. That creates something called hormetic stress response, which is, hormesis. It's a process where your body receives certain amounts of stress in different ways, and your body becomes stronger because of it. It becomes more resilient. It becomes more adaptogenic. And we need that. We become too comfortable where our immune system is literally been lulled to sleep. And so, what we see right now with all the malarkey going on with the so-called pandemic and all the numbers, and they keep changing, the goalpost keeps changing everything. One thing that's clear is that it really all comes down to your immune system, and your immune system it has an innate system and it has an adaptive system, and your adaptive system is the backup immune system that kicks on when the front line leukocytes, the white blood cells, get overwhelmed, and then you have this backup supply that comes in and then just and takes over. Well, a lot of people, they don't have that adaptive system kicking on very well because they haven't adapted very well. They've literally been maladapted to stress, trauma, doubt, worry, processed food, toxic relationships. Negative thought spirals, and all that has an effect on our immunological health. So when we see these things, these different claims or numbers or whatever, we've got to remember that there's multiple factors going on here, and this has nothing to do with a virus. And that's a whole tirade in of itself. This has to do with empowering your immune system first and foremost.
Yeah. You and I have been running parallel for a while. I think we both got into the holistic health business around the same time, around 2010, 2011.
Yeah, exactly.
I've always appreciated your due diligence. You're clearly a researcher, a hardcore researcher. You do your homework, and then you present that homework to whoever wants to listen. You've written 4 books. You've gone at this pretty hardcore over the last 10 or so years. How have you been able to handle the holistic health business? Let's talk. The business side is a whole other animal.
Totally.
How has that given you advantages and disadvantages? What are the pros and cons that you've dealt with over the last 10 years or so? When you have this understanding and this knowledge and you want to help people, but at the same time you have to run a business because there's this thing called electricity. You got to keep the lights on, you got to pay the bills, and there's this tug of war going on because it's not a regular job.
No, it's not, and definitely not in this year like anything other than ordinary procedures at all. Over the last 10 years, it's definitely been a full-on journey, and the entrepreneurial journey didn't really start until I'd say really 6 years ago is when I really started to adopt more of an entrepreneur mindset. Before then, I was just writing my books. I was touring around speaking. I would dabble in different things like that, but I didn't really have an entrepreneurial identity. It was more like kind of the original David Wolf model, and just kind of running around speaking and writing books and promoting the message and really just doing that anywhere I could. And then eventually I realized that I needed to really get structured and organized. I really needed to get this money thing figured out. And this how do I create a legitimate business, an online business, a coaching practice? How do I start putting together online courses? How do I take my books and translate that into like a video course?
Yeah.
And then start to be able to create an online business that can allow me the freedom to take care of myself, live the lifestyle that I want, have a certain amount of abundance at any given time, but certainly to take care of all the basics and get myself going. And it's been a wild ride. It's been a wild ride in that department. I certainly have not cracked the code per se. I'm definitely at that place now where I feel like everything is finally coming together. But over this last, little less than a decade, it's just been a fly of the pants kind of thing. It's just been like learning as I go, making mistakes, fumbling forward, a lot of getting out of my comfort zone, and a lot of reaching out to people and engaging with people, having conversations, getting on the phone with people, talking to people, and that's really the key to success. And that's the thing we all have to get really comfortable with, again, especially people that have become very adapted to social media and internet communication, and even people that have been, crushing it in internet marketing and stuff. We have to actually adapt back to connecting with real people and developing relationships, because that's really where the transference of wealth, or the transference of financial abundance is, the exchange of goods and services in the exchange for resources. It happens through a conversation.
That's right.
It happens through some kind of exchange between two people. Right. And especially now, what I've also been tracking is through this whole process of this unearthing of everything in our world. And I think the emerging model of conscious entrepreneurship, not to say that the prior models, like business models, aren't going to be there. I think it's going to be a different consciousness model. It's going to be a different like a servant leader type of model where it's all about service. It's all about not just providing value, but truly serving, whatever that means. And ultimately serving means I'm helping people. I'm helping animals. I'm helping children. I'm helping the ecosystem. I'm helping whatever. It's all about helping, putting that at the forefront. And then, you know, whatever the thing is, the business, that comes as an effect, as a byproduct of front loading service,
Right.
and going out there and really being about helping people. That's what I see us moving into.
Yeah, you know, I brought this topic up because I went through it, and you know, I went hardcore with the marketing and everything, and I was working with sick people. I was working with people with chronic illnesses, and it's heavy stuff. And then on top of it, I'm like, well, how do I expand? And it's this whole rabbit hole of, you know, funnels and social media ads, and man, I burnt myself out. Totally burnt myself out in 2018. It culminated into a let go, an awakening. And I became the inner peace guy because that's what happened to me. I hardly ever talk about diet and nutrition anymore. It's been almost eliminated out of my vocabulary because I saw you walking the same path. I mean, I don't know what you were feeling, obviously, but I saw it, and us being around the same age, you know, I was like, yeah, man. Like, I remember when you came out with your mastery program, and I was like, that's a lot of work. I was like, that dude's doing a lot of work, and a lot of work doesn't always lead to a lot of money.
That is definitely true. That is definitely true.
And sometimes we can get into a state of, you know, I'm going to bang this out, and, you know, we put in so much work, and then the results aren't there like we want them to be, and we can become very disappointed in that. And, you know, our ego is triggered, and I see a lot of people going through this. I also used to teach up and coming people in the health field through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. They hired me to be a teacher. This is back in the day, and I would see people come in so spunky, so excited, man. And then you saw the word health coach everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. The health coach title has been demolished. It doesn't mean what it did. And I see these people go into the business, and it doesn't work out. And we saw this with a mutual friend of ours, Layla Salvade, who was on this podcast. She was a student of mine at IIN. And, you know, we didn't even know we were running similar spiritual paths behind the scenes. She was going to a Zen monastery when I was getting into some Zen stuff. And boom, she had awakenings, and you know, health and nutrition is a thing of the past for her. She's teaching people how to awaken their heart.
Yeah.
You could have never told me I'd be doing an inner peace podcast and talking about the spiritual stuff, you know, 5 years ago, never mind 10 years ago. I thought I was going to be talking about vitamins and minerals.
Yeah, for the rest of your life. Yeah.
So I see a pattern of people coming in, and, you know, perhaps when we're old and gray in another 20 years, you know, we're going to be talking about something completely different.
Well, I can definitely guarantee that we will be talking about something completely different, because the relevancy of our times is forcing a new narrative to emerge. So we're letting go of a lot of these trivial type of things, and not to say in the nutrition and diet aspect is anything other than trivial, but it's kind of like once you've mastered that dimension and you've made your way through that entire like minefield, you kind of just develop a competency there's universal principles, right? Like health has universal principles, and then you can sophisticate it as much as you want. But what I've found is that ultimately simplifying things is ultimately the road towards truth. It's simple, it's tried and true, it's universal truth. And there's different body types and different metabolisms and different microbiome dispositions and different things like that. But that doesn't take away from the principles themselves. It just means some people might need different specifications, different types of dietary approaches, and that kind of thing. And I think for me, that had always been a perspective that I had adopted very early on, was that there's no one size fits all for anybody. And there's so many different phases and cycles, even hormonal cycles that we go through, in the chronological process of I don't like to say aging anymore. And I think, the number one cause of death is aging. And that's more so like a biological fact. It's so this whole thing on like aging is a bit of a program in of itself, maybe different topic for different day to get deep into, but but it's really about the principles, really about like life force. How do I cultivate more life force within me? How do I steward my energy? How do I manage my energy? If I want more time and I'm trying to manage time, then I'm going to age myself quickly because I'm stuck in this time space continuum. I'm stuck in this obsession with time, and that time actually compresses upon us the more we focus on it, and we lose time and we lose quality of time, and it goes very quickly, and that's how our biological clock gets hijacked. Through this obsession of time and counting and measuring and managing. Really what we need to do is just manage our energy, because if we manage our energy, then we will be more effective with the time that we have at any given moment. And that's been a huge lesson for me in the last couple of years, and especially in the last couple of months, is that all of this has forced me to be very present. Like I have a lot of goals and stuff. It's like, like for a good 4 months, I had no goals. That's the thing that I'm doing and I'm working on, but like not with any serious like motivational force to like get a goal a month or 2 months or 3 months. I'm just tracking the unfolding of events, moment by moment, multiple times a day, every day, week by week, month by month, and tracking the conclusion point of this particular iteration that we've all been living through, and preparing for the transition into what will be.
Something you just said, though, that stood out to me was that you said you didn't have any goals for 4 months. Explain.
Well, my buddy David Wolf really said it best when he said, I've just gotten out of believing things and gotten into entertaining possibilities. And so for me, it's not so much anymore of like projecting a definite outcome or specific goal, traditional goal setting, just having a goal and having a timeline and like mapping it out and reverse engineering it, all that I found has become a lot harder to track, because things are moving so quickly, and I'm unavoidably affected because I'm an empath, so I feel I'm kind of a transmuter for everything going on. That's why I am such a researcher, and that's why I am so obsessed with decoding things, so I can kind of reorganize what I'm feeling or what I'm intuiting, what I'm seeing, and then turn it into something that actually seems to make sense. And that's really been my job. And so that's a full-time thing in of itself. And that's taken priority over any like, oh, well, I got this business goal. I want to make so-and-so amount of money. And yeah, I'm happy with all that. I've just gotten to a place where I realize my priorities are not about that. My priorities are, protection of women, children, sentient beings, and bringing God back into the conversation, quite frankly, because I just see we're at the crossroads right now. So I mean, that's really where I'm at with it right now. I see that changing, but the goal thing is letting go of. It's not that I don't set objectives or have to-do lists. It's just that I'm very clear that this is a moment by moment unfolding, and I'm just like anybody, feeling my way through it, and I'm taking what I receive, what presents itself to me, moment by moment, and then I go with that. I go with the energy. In other words, I'm going where the energy takes me, where the hyperflow of synchronicity takes me. That's where I'm going. And if that leads to a financial breakthrough, which sometimes it does, or a business advancement, or something with one of my projects, then great. But I'm not forcing it. I am not forcing anything anymore.
Right.
That's really where I'm at with that.
Goal is a key thing, because you're or were a goal-oriented individual. You have to be, because you were looking to be an Olympic athlete, weren't you?
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
So you're competitive.
Very competitive, but I'd say like more than just competitive, just driven to excel. Like
personal development. You want to make yourself better.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing about that too, when I was pursuing that particular timeline in my life, it wasn't so much that I was even setting goals. I was just fully immersed in the experience of it. And you could say, yeah, like the goal was to go to the Olympics, but that was more like, that was a vision. That's a different thing here, like goals and vision. It's like I was pulled by a vision. Right. And so maybe there's like milestone goals that are like they're
the carrot. It's the carrot, the proverbial carrot.
Yeah. It's like this reward for the work well done. But it really wasn't about a goal. These things are happening along the way. And that's the same thing when I got into the health world, and I decided that I was going to be an author. It was like, why then? I just do what an author does. I just write. It was like, I'm a high performance athlete, a martial artist. It's not this whole thing. It's like, that's just what I do. Like, that's just, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like the identity was so anchored in, and it was reinforced through the repetition of my behavior that reflected the identity. I don't really have to question it. This is what I do. This is who I am. It's not a big deal. And that tends to produce immediate results.
Let's go back to you being a martial artist. I read that you started when you were 4 and you were influenced by none other than Bruce Lee.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very first influence in my life, actually.
Yeah. What was your connection to him? What was it about him?
So my first conscious memory was of Enter the Dragon. Can't remember where it was or what it was, but I just remember having the scenes in that movie imprinted into my consciousness, and that's the first memory I can remember. And so it just kind of like left a mark. It planted a seed, and it imprinted me for the rest of my life. And so Bruce Lee, I feel like there's a lot I can say about him, but he was just larger than life. Even when when I came across him, he was he had passed away in 1973, and so that was so it was about like 10, 12 years, 1985, so about 12 years later, and it felt like I could feel his presence. I could feel his presence through his movies and through his dynamicism and his charisma and everything. Like there was just kind of this energy there that I tuned into. And I think that was the biggest thing in the beginning. I just tuned into the energy. Eventually, as I got older, I studied more of his philosophy, and I could comprehend and understand the story and everything. And I got really deep into the stories and biographies of historical people. Especially in that particular timeline, whether it was Malcolm X or Martin Luther King or Bruce Lee or Muhammad Ali. I really became interested in the stories, in the life stories of many different characters. And I think I used that as some kind of developmental tool. I didn't have a father in my life. So I think that void, that archetypal void, was filled by these external role models that kind of showed me and role modeled me a particular vision. And that vision just came alive for me. And at some point in my mid-teens, I really took it seriously. And then from there, it was just, I just transferred all that discipline and that structure that Bruce Lee had with all of his workouts, and mapping out all of his workouts every day and tracking his progress and all of his exercises and the amount of reps and all that. And I adopted that, and then I just transferred it over to what I was doing. And so I got that discipline. I got that kind of systematic approach to daily progress.
Studying Bruce Lee, did that serve as a catalyst to bring you to more Eastern religious and mystical traditions?
Absolutely, yeah. I think I was definitely exposed to the Eastern philosophy very, very early on in meditation, and especially as a consequence of doing traditional martial arts and being around traditional martial arts masters and being around the Asian culture, whether it was the Korean Taekwondo culture, it was the Japanese samurai, Bushido, karate culture, it was Wushu, Wing Chun, that I kind of just got really, really deep into just taking in everything I could about martial arts, because it was my obsession, it was my passion. So there's a lot of indirect and direct kind of influences in my mindset and how I became aware of, Eastern philosophy, and then eventually more so the mysticism aspect that came along a little bit later, more so in the last like 5 to 10 years, really, really strongly. But it just piggybacked everything else. It just kind of came through as a next level understanding of what these philosophies were really about, what the monks were able to do, all the incredible feats they're able to do, and the way they're able to control their mind, to control their body, and literally melt ice just through thought alone and create, heat.
Attention.
Yeah.
Attention, intention, powerful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The Jedi are real, as I like to say.
Absolutely.
There's so much more I want to talk about, but we're running out of time. I want to end with this. How would you describe Bruce Lee's famous statement? Just be water.
Just be water. It can crash, it can flow. Be water, my friend. And really, so water, and again, just talking about water in of itself is one of my greatest passions, and have been for all these years. And it's the most profound exploration into any aspect of like health, and hydration alone is just unbelievably fascinating and deep and dug down rich. But water reflects this adaptability. By the way, well, let me just say this about water. Water is the most ennobled substance in the world. And what I mean by that is that water is how spirit, the starting point, the source code origin point of how spirit manifests into the world is through water. Right? The hydrological cycle, and then that becoming spring water eventually. And that's why spring water has been such a passion for me, because it's encoded with the consciousness and the information of that particular ecosystem coming out of that underground aquifer. And that has very, very deep meaning. And so so what Bruce Lee is saying is not surface level, but the basic of it is like, you got to be adaptable. You got to be able to flow. You cannot be rigid. And so like, this is interesting too, getting into the diet culture. Bruce Lee's philosophy influenced me hugely, because I became aware that the diet culture is so riddled with just aberrant belief systems and just complete nonsense, that people are just running around proposing this diet and getting into these debacles and arguments and fighting against each other. And it's like, whoa, what is this? What is going on? This has nothing to do with health. It's really just like, these are just experiments at best but I saw that religiosity, rigid kind of attitude play out in the diet world. And I just took this perspective of like, actually, we need to drop diets forever. We need to get onto the live it and start living it and get off diets altogether, because diets are killing us and we need to get off that. And that was really Bruce Lee's whole thing, is like, I'm going to break down the fixed, rigid patterns of classical martial arts and the mess and the ineffective and the sloppiness, or just the fancy movements that and routines that lead nowhere. Right. And he was just like, break down all the non-essentials, and what remains is what is true. And that's really actually been my journey in the whole health world, is just like going through everything, breaking it all down, and then 10 years later, just seeing what's left over and be like, okay, that's what's true.
Be water, my friend. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Ronnie. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Ronnie's one of those people you want to keep your eye on for many years to come, because he will evolve and do more research and more decoding, and he'll have findings for you. As for me, of course, you can find my meditation album on Spotify, Apple. I'm also in the process of launching a Patreon page so that this podcast can be supported and I can provide you with exclusive content. If you're looking for more of my work, go to drreese.com. That's doctor spelled out, and I'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Inner Peace with Dr. Reese. If this episode opened your heart, feel free to share on social media and tell your loved ones. Also, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, may peace be with you.